So this is the first video in a series of videos, maybe 4 or 5 entries. I'm just calling them Magical Memories, and it's kind of me waxing nostalgic about back when I first started playing Magic the Gathering. So this would be early to mid 90s. Anyway, this episode, this whatever it is about Hellfire. So Hellfire was, when I started playing Magic, one of my favorite cards. I never played black, so I never actually got to play the card, but I love the art on it. I thought it was really cool. Actually, Hellfire is the card that inspired me to actually read Paradise Lost, and it may be the card that's inspiring me to reread it right now. So, interesting card, very flavorful art for what it was, and I just kind of got hooked on it. So at the time I had one copy of Hellfire, and it was an English copy, and they had a sports card show where they had Magic the Gathering cards, and me and my friends would occasionally rent a stand there, and we would sell Magic cards. From the stand it was like $60 to rent it for the weekend. And one weekend, basically we all had leather jackets, and my friend had a giant skull airbrushed on his jacket, and I went over to the stand that did the airbrushing and brought them a copy of Hellfire and said, "Hey, can you airbrush this in my jacket?" Well, a couple hours later and $120 later, I ended up with this jacket. I still take care of it the way that they asked me to take care of it. They said, take some Murphy's oil soap, take some water, spray it down every couple months, wipe it off. It's held up well. I mean, this is, over 20 years old at this point, and it's still holding up good. So that's my Hellfire jacket from way back when. And, it's just, I always thought the art was really cool. So I'm going to go from here, cut to downstairs where I have all my painting equipment, and you'll be able to see some more. So 10 or 15 years ago, I'm not exactly sure when, I contacted Mr. Ventures and I said, "Hey, do you happen to have the original art for Hellfire laying around?" And he'd sold it. He had quite a few of his original arts left, but that one had been sold at some point. But he did have a couple prints of Hellfire, so I picked one of those up. Really cool. But what I wanted was a painting. I wanted, for some reason, an oil painting of Hellfire hanging up on my wall. I thought that would just be awesome. So I am not artistically inclined, but I'm pretty good at following instructions, so I invested and I bought all of these paints and then some, and I set about basically painting Hellfire over and over and over, doing grid lines and figuring out what should be in each part of the grid, and then basically trying to mimic the entire thing onto a canvas. So I'm just going to go through a couple of my attempts thus far here. So I started this maybe 5 years ago, doing copies of Hellfire, and about 2 years ago I stopped at some point, although I felt definitely was making some progress. So I'm hoping to pick it back up, but this messy area here is the area where I worked. It's still setting the same way it was when I finished my last one. Chances of me coming back, well, I guess we'll see. This was my first attempt to actually paint something with oil paints ever. So I basically sat down with a copy of Hellfire and a canvas and went to town. Obviously there's a lot of issues here, but as I continue to paint, this one I gave up on part way, but it was coming together a little bit better. And then we keep going on. Here, definitely finished the piece at least. A lot of issues with the skeletons and the face, and then again the skeletons are a little bit better here, but the face kept giving me problems. Things started to pick up though around here. Again, skeletons looking a little bit better, background a little improved, but the face, ugh. But then we get to this version. This version is definitely better looking. It's probably my best one to date. There might be a couple touch-up spots, and at that point I'd be able to use it. I tried to do another version after this one. This one's on a wood board, but again, this one I screwed up the face again. I think the rest of it looks really sharp though, so I could go back and I could try to touch up the face on this one, and it might be a final work at that point. Here are my mussings on Hellfire. You know, really flavorful art, flavorful card. It kind of got me hooked early. The funny thing was, I had sold my original copy, and I really wanted to have the art laying around, so when I first got back into Magic, I bought an Italian copy of Hellfire, and you know what, it just wasn't the same. The quality between the two isn't exactly the same. So then I went out and I bought an English Hellfire, and even though I play old school 93, 94, I still haven't actually played the card. I've had it in a couple decks, it's just never come up where I've never had the mana for it. So it's kind of funny. I don't think I've ever played Hellfire. I've tried. I've had the card, I've had it in decks. When I submitted my deck list for one tournament, I was playing mono red, and I wanted to put Hellfire in my sideboard just, you know, for the fun of it, so that someone would look at my deck list and be like, what the hell, man? But I decided not to. So I'm sure everyone has, you know, cards that have stuck with them that they thought were really cool looking, or, you know, really awesome. And, you know, I've seen people hoard Stone Rain and all kinds of really other cool cards, and I'm sure if Hellfire were a cheap common, I'd have a bunch of them. But, you know, that was just my card for the longest time. I just thought it was so cool.